to Cooper Talk.
Welcome to Cooper Talk. I'm your host, Steve Cooper, and remember, I'm only as hip as my guest. And I got to tell you something, people. I remember back when I was a sophomore at Stockton State College down there in Pomona, New Jersey. It was 83, 84. That was the year I was down there for that year. And my friend Randy Schindewolf had a turntable in our dorm, and he always cranked music when we were either going out to drink or we were studying. And one of his albums, heavy in rotation, was the debut album self-titled Bad Company. And to this day, when I hear Can't Get Enough, I swear to God, it takes me back to a young guy with long hair in college having fun. And I'm honored today to have the man who drummed on the album and the man who is from Bad Company. It's Simon Kirke. How you doing, Simon?
Hey, Steve. How are you?
Good.
Yeah, can't get enough. That was a long time ago.
Isn't that crazy when you think about it? And you hear it on the radio now, and it still holds up. But for you, it must be thinking, because you had solo albums and things like that. I mean, it must really take you back to a certain time because everyone knows that song. I mean, what's it like for you when you hear it in the supermarket or people come up to you and go, "Oh, we love Can't Get Enough." What's it like for you?
I love it. I'm not so much the supermarket. It hasn't quite graduated to elevators or supermarket yet, although I hear All Right Now and Feel Like Making Love a lot in my gym. But look, when people come up to me and say, how much they love the music back then, it means a lot. I mean, it's one of the reasons we play. Back then, I was 25 and it was just to get girls. It was just to have fun, be in a band, travel the world. Everything I wanted to do, everything I aspired to, came true with Bad Company. And that first album, and Can't Get Enough, by the way, was the very first track that we recorded. So it means a lot to me when people say things like that. I'm honored, quite honestly.
I want to talk about your career with Bad Company, but I want to talk about your last solo album was in 2017, All Because of You. And you play ukulele, you actually do a Bad Company song on there. What made you and you've done 3 solo albums, what made you gravitate and decide to do the solo albums? Because it's from drummer to frontman with guitar. I mean, was there something that you said, I'm just tired of playing drums, or how'd that happen?
Well, years ago, I saw Richie Havens in a club out here on Long Island. And he must have been on stage for about 2 hours. He played 4 songs and he told stories. And I thought, you know what? I've got all these songs that are sort of backlogged in my brain and on various tapes and whatever. And I just wanted to sort of exercise these songs and get them out. Not necessarily, people want to buy them, fine. But in order for me to move on as a songwriter, I have to get rid of the songs that I already have inside me. So, I wrote those three albums. Not necessarily to have any great commercial success because they didn't, I'm proud of them. And I might actually redo the first one because the first one was called 7 Rays of Hope. And I did that in my little basement in Manhattan. It was just me playing all the instruments. And someone said later on, those are really good songs, but I really didn't do them justice. But that's a story for another time. But that's mainly the reason I did them, Steve, was to just get them out there. And I think they stand up pretty well.
Now, you said you played all the instruments. When did you, as a kid, did you just concentrate on drums and then graduate to instruments as you got older? Or what was your musical, the progression to being able to play all those instruments? Because I always say, I have friends who are drummers, and I always say drummers are the smartest guys because they got to use the left side of the brain and the right side of the brain. Most people, if you try to bang on a desktop and move your feet, it just doesn't work.
Well, I always said if you can ride a bicycle, you can play drums. Not necessarily at the same time, but what happened was I was introduced to music when I was in school. I guess I was about 12, and I was in the school choir. I had a pretty nice, soprano voice. And then we played recorder, which is like a flute. And that was, it was okay. It wasn't great. But when I heard the Beatles for the first time in '63, I was 12, going on 13. And that really sparked something in me. But the lightning bolt that got me drumming was when we got our first TV. It was a black and white set. There was no colour back in those days. And there was a program called All That Jazz, and it featured big band, swing bands. And I was absolutely transfixed by the drummer. I just loved what the drummer was doing. And the whole rhythm, that fast, it was such a lively, full of life. And I started, my mum had a pair of knitting needles on the sofa, and I started banging away on the electric fire. And I think that was really the first time I got into drums, as it were. But then I had to, there were no music stores. Where I was brought up in England was very, very remote. So I had to cut sticks from a hedge. I had to bang on little books on my bed and listen to my little transistor radio playing this thing called Radio Luxembourg, which was a station out in Luxembourg in Europe that played all black music and progressive music. That's how I learned drumming, really. But to take it one step further, when I was in school, about 14, I'd had a little band, and my bus driver, the school bus driver, he collared me as I was getting off the bus. And he said, "Here, I hear you play drums." I said, "Well, yeah, I do, and I'm very good," trying to promote myself. And he said, "Well, look, it wasn't called a disco back in those days, but he said, I have a stack of 45s, and I have 2 turntables, and I go around, the sort of tri-state area, and I play records for people to dance to. Would you like to set your own?" I thought, wow. And you know what? I did that for over 2 years, and that's where I got my sense of time, playing along to all different types of music, Beatles, Rolling Stones, and then Tamla Motown, Otis Redding, then some old country stuff. And then I got into guitar thanks to a judge in court.
Well, what happened there? Wait, tell me this.
Well, my neighbours were complaining about me practicing drums. The instrument worse than practicing drums is violin, and I was spared that. But my neighbours complained, and so we had to go to family court. And the judge ruled. He said, "Look, I can see you're young." I didn't go. My father went. I was too young. And he said, "Tell your son he can practice for half an hour a night, only after he's done his homework." And banged the gavel, and that was it. So after half an hour, my dad would come up to the bedroom and say, you can't practice anymore." So my brother, who was in the army in Germany, had come home on leave and brought a little electric guitar, no amp, just an electric guitar, which he left in my bedroom. And I started playing on that. Just, I really wanted to play music. And I was just playing along to old blues records and old Beatles songs. And I've been playing guitar almost as long as I've been playing drums.
Now, you said you grew up in a remote area and you're playing the drums. So how do you start your journey to this amazing career you've had? I mean, you go from 14, you're playing drums, the judge tells you to be quiet. What are your steps that got you to become a professional musician?
Well, during that time that I was playing along with the disco, this guy came up. He was a bit older than me. And he said, "Look, I've got a band called the Maniacs." I thought, what a great name. The Maniacs. And he says, "I think you'd be really good." And I'd never played in a band before. I'd only just played along the records. So with my parents' permission, I got permission to go and jam with them. And they were great. And so I joined the band. We started going all over the area around my hometown, playing in these little clubs and village halls. And then I really got the bug. I thought I was getting pretty good at this. And so it came crunch time with my parents. When I was 16, I wanted to leave school. And I hadn't got my high school diploma. They're called ordinary level and advanced level. And with ordinary levels, O-levels, you can, not bad. But if you get advanced levels, you can go to a good college. So they said, "No, you're not going to leave school with an O-level. We want you to get an A-level certificate," which means staying another 2 years. And I was kind of pissed off, but they were right. They were right. And I'm glad I stayed because I got pretty good grades. And then they said another part of the deal, you can leave school at 18, take a 2-year gap year, whatever you want to call it, and try your luck down in London. And if nothing happens after 2 years, then you go to college. And I thought that was a pretty good compromise. So I did. And I went down to London. I stayed with some distant relatives and answered auditions and did menial labour jobs and all sorts of things. And nothing was happening. And my time was running out. And then the last month of the 24 months that they'd given me, I saw an ad for a band called the Black Cat Bones. And I thought, what a great name. They were a blues band, and they were way across London. It was like, I don't know, going from Philly to almost to New York to see this band. It was a long way. So I tossed a coin, and it came down heads, and I went to see this band, and I met Paul Kossoff, who was the guitarist. And I said I didn't think his drummer was very good. And he said, well, it's funny you should say that. He's getting the sack tonight. He's leaving. And we're having auditions tomorrow if you want to come along. So I came along the next day and I got the job, and I hooked up with Paul Kossoff, and then we went on and we formed Free with Paul Rodgers and Andy Fraser.
Was it hard for you to acclimate to a band when you first started? Because as you said, you were used to the DJ, but now you had to work with everything and different, personalities. I mean, what was it like? Because you're a young guy. Was it something you picked up very quickly?
I was a young guy, and also I was a townie. All these boys were country boys, and they were big. They were like 4 or 5 years older than me. So I kind of had to assert myself. And I think having that training, playing along with all those different styles of songs over those 2 years, really helped me adjust. And they'd say, right, we're going to do this song, and I come straight in, and they were like, fucking hell, all right, So I in life, I think you make your own luck sometimes, and that really helped me. And even though I talked with a funny accent, I wasn't a country boy, they kind of took me under their wing. I was like a little brother. And then I started singing as well, backup harmonies. And I really think that band was pretty damn good, actually. And it was a springboard to go on to bigger and better things. It really helped me.
Now, with Free, how long till you guys got a record deal? What was your, because you guys had a hit, but what was your progression to getting recognition?
Oh, wow. Well, it was all very compressed. We were formed in 1968. I was 19. And we hadn't been around very long, but we were lucky. We knew a couple of people. And Paul Kossoff's father was a guy called David Kossoff. He was an actor, a very well-known actor in London, in England, really. And Andy Fraser, the bass player, knew a guy called Alexis Corner, who was the sort of godfather of the blues scene in London at that time. And so we kind of, a couple of the cogs were greased, as it were. We got a little in. But we were very, very good. We had to sort of live up to the hype, if you will. So really, we landed this residency at the Marquee, which was a famous club in London. Every Monday night, it wasn't a great spot, but it was the Marquee. And while we were there, Island Records had heard about us, and they sent down one of their scouts to check us out. And we got a phone call that Chris Blackwell, who was the head of Island Records, would like to see us in his office, next week, if you'd like to come along. And we were like, wow, fucking great. Island Records, they had Traffic, they had Joe Cocker, they were a really good label. So we went along. We were only kids, we were only like 19 and 17 and 18. And Chris Blackwell said, I hear that you're a really good band, but we don't like the name. We don't like Free. We think it's too nebulous. People are going to get confused. We don't like the name, so we want to call you the Heavy Metal Kids. And we went, what? You're fucking kidding me. We were like, no. I mean, quaking inside because this was Island Records. And we said no. And he said, well, then we don't have a deal. Wow. Okay. So we went out the office thinking, what have we done? Well, we stuck to our guns, and Andy Fraser, who was the business guy of the band, he got a call later that night from Chris Blackwell, who said, you know what, we're going to give you a 6-month trial. You can keep the name, and after 6 months, we'll renegotiate. And we started working like you wouldn't believe, gig after gig after gig, all over England, all over the United Kingdom, Europe, building up this fan base. And we got a 1-album deal. 1 album. And if this doesn't sell, you know, the option is on Ireland to say yes or no. Well, it didn't sell, but we got enough good reviews for them to say, you know, we'll extend your record contract. And we, you know, after 2 years, we hit with All Right Now. And boy, did we hit.
Do you remember hearing that for the first time on the radio?
Oh, no. Quite honestly, no. We were probably in a van driving to a gig somewhere. Yeah. But it really turned our lives around. For better and for worse, quite honestly.
Well, why do you say for worse?
Well, because we were suddenly thrust into the limelight, which is something we'd always wanted. But instead of doing a town every other day, we were doing a country. Our workload just tripled. And then we had to do the follow-up, you know, because All Right Now was a massive hit. And Island Records were very happy, but, you know, we contracted to do another album, and singles sold albums, as you remember. If you had a hit single, you were pretty much guaranteed a hit album. So we had to come up with a follow-up to All Right Now and Fire and Water, the album that it came from. And the follow-ups did not do very well at all. And that's really, it's what happened when, you know, suddenly Paul Rodgers and Andy Fraser said, we've had enough of this, you know, we're going to break the band up. And that's what happened.
So what is that like? You know, you as you said, you know, you're thrust into the limelight, you become popular, and now the band's broken up. Were you scrambling? Did you and Paul already have a cahoots? You'll start Bad Company? I mean, what is it like? Because you are successful and you're young. What did you go through?
Well, we did have time on our side, and we also, you know, we were young, and that was the problem. I think we needed better management to say, you know, hey guys, you've done a lot of work, you know, take some time off. And that was what it was, the workload. It was really crippling, even for youngsters like us. And the management, I think, were at fault in that they didn't structure our, you know, our schedule a little better. So Paul Rodgers said, I've had enough, I want out. Andy Fraser joined him, and the band broke up, which left me and Paul Kossoff like spinning on our axis, you know, like, whoa, what happened? Suddenly we haven't got a band anymore. We did a solo album, me and Paul Kossoff. It was called Kossoff, Kirke, Tetsu and Rabbit. Tetsu was a Japanese bass player, and Rabbit was the keyboard player who went on to be with The Who, a very, very good player. And then, you know, we reformed, reformed. It wasn't really quite the same. Paul Kossoff developed a drug problem, and we kind of got back together for him, really, which it was honourable, but it wasn't the best thing to do. And in 1973, after a couple of breakups and get back together, we broke up completely, and I went off to Brazil. I had a girlfriend down there, and I lived there for a while. And then when I came back, I called Paul Rodgers and said, hey, man, what are you up to? And he said, well, I've met this guy called Mick Rouse from Mott the Hoople. He's leaving Mott the Hoople, and we want to form a band. And would you like to, you know, play drums? I said, yes, please. And that was the beginnings of Bad Company.
So how did you guys end up on Swan Song? I believe you were the first band sung by Swan Song, which that must be something, you know, because they were such a big label.
Well, it was all thanks to our New Zealand roadie. He had a friend of his. They came from New Zealand, and his friend was working for Led Zeppelin. and they were good pals. And Graham, our guy, got hold of Clive, Led Zeppelin's guy, and said, Paul, we sat round a table one night and said, we want to be a big band. Who's the biggest band in the world right now? Led Zeppelin. Do we know anyone? Clive, he works for Led Zeppelin. So we got hold of Peter Grant's number, his phone number. And Paul Rodgers called Peter Grant up and said, I've got a band together and we'd like you to see it. And Peter Grant said, yeah, I know. I said, what? Yeah, because it was all supposed to be secret. Yeah, I know, I've heard about it. I've heard about this band. It's called Bad Company or something. Good name. Oh, great. Anyway, Peter Grant came to see us and he loved us, and we didn't know about Swan Song, but he said, look, my boys are putting together a record label and we'd like you to be on it. Wow. So, yeah, a big yes all round. And that was the launch. It was a perfect storm, Steve. It was. We had this band. We were on Led Zeppelin's label. We had some great songs. And it was the launch of their record label. So it received worldwide publicity. It couldn't fail. And, the first album is still one of my favorites. And it's still selling like hotcakes.
What makes it one of your favorites when you say that? Because I always wonder, because you guys have such a large body of work. I mean, and it's been your musical styles change, but why is it one of your favorites? Is it the nostalgia?
There was there was a freshness to it. There was a freedom to it. There was an enthusiasm, to doing it. We recorded it in 4 days, by the way, and mixed it in 3. So the whole thing was done in a week. There was just a freshness about the whole thing, and the fact that it launched our career certainly helped. I think maybe there were more mature songs in the subsequent albums, like Shooting Star, Feel Like Making Love. They were wonderful, wonderful songs. But without that first album, you wouldn't have had Shooting Star or Feel Like Making Love or Weep No More. It was just the forerunner to everything that came afterwards, really.
Now, were you ever worried when that first album started getting successful that the same thing would happen that happened with Free? You guys would get overworked and doing that?
Well, we were actually well prepared for what came. And in fact, from 74 through to 79, we had a ball. I mean, we were very much, this is what we wanted to do, and we were well prepared to do it. But unfortunately, I was developing a substance abuse problem, as were some other members of the band. And it took its toll. And there came a time around 1980 when Bonzo died, John Bonham died, and John Lennon was shot. It was the worst year for rock and roll. And once again, Paul said, I've had enough of this, fuck it. And he opted to leave the band, and it kind of left us high and dry. Zeppelin broke up. It was just a lousy time. But for those 6 years, we had a great time, and we left our mark.
What is it like when you're on that upscale and you're starting to do bigger and bigger venues? I mean, as a drummer, because you guys, I always see the drummer and a bass player, like when you watch baseball, the middle infield, you need a second base and shortstop. They keep the glue together. What is it like when you're in the helm? Because you guys were playing big venues. When you're just like looking out and people are into your beat.
Oh, it's great. It's lovely. I mean, that's what we always wanted to do. That's what we aspired to. But I learned a lot watching more seasoned professionals. I used to really flail and, I used to be exhausted by the third song. And that's why monitors were invented. You have to remember that back in the Isle of Wight, the festivals that we played in the Isle of Wight back in 1969 and 70, there were no monitors. There were no monitors at Woodstock. You just used, the amps. So I remember watching, some professionals, and they were letting the monitors do the work for them in a way. And as the size of the venues increased, Yeah, sure. I play with passion, but I don't kill myself anymore. I know how to play to a big audience now, and you just try and project to the first 3 or 4 rows, and the PA system will do the rest. So don't worry, they'll hear you.
Now, when you guys were, by a company and the albums after them, did you feel pressure that you needed to come out with more hits? Because you did. All your albums did well. But did you guys feel that internal pressure? Like, okay, we just got done this Bad Company album. It was great. So now we're doing Straight Shooter. That has to be a hit. I mean, what happens with the dynamic? Do you feel the pressure, or you just sit there and say...
Well, at that time, we were in, like, Paul's the same age as me. So we were around 26, 27 when Straight Shooter and Run with the Pack came out. And Paul was really writing a lot of good, classy songs. And he always had a wealth of songs because we were happy. We were a happy band. We were playing what we wanted and we were being a success. And there's no greater combination than that in life. Doing what you love and getting paid a lot of money to do it. Wonderful feeling. But sooner or later, there comes a time where you get married or you get a girlfriend. You don't, or they don't want you to go out quite as much. There's a little wedge, a feminine wedge, if you wish, that starts coming in. And we all got girlfriends and we all, found that our priorities were changing a little bit. And I was never really cognizant of deadlines. Suddenly we get a call from the office saying, you've got a new album to finish by November of next year. We go, fucking hell, really? Yeah, you got a contract with 6 albums. They're going to give you however millions of dollars, but you got to produce an album. And all of a sudden it's like, wow, okay. And that's what happened after Run with the Pack. When we did Burning Sky, we had to finish it, and we really didn't have a lot of songs. And it kind of showed, we slapped songs together. There were a couple of good ones. Burning Sky was a great song, but the overall album was the first album that the critics went, not their greatest efforts. We were like, okay. So, yeah.
Now you co-wrote the song "Bad Company." Tell me about that, because I always love the fact that there's a song called "Bad Company" on an album "Bad Company" called "Bad Company." Now that was something. I mean, was that you sat down with Paul, or what was the process for you to get that on the album?
Well, at that time, this was before we recorded the first album. Paul had this beautiful piano. He'd always wanted a piano. He had this huge Yamaha piano in his little cottage. In fact, it took up almost 2 little rooms. And he was noodling around. He had this, we would all been watching Clint Eastwood, spaghetti westerns and tumbleweeds and lone riders, after the, bail bondsman, that whole sort of macho stuff. And he had this little riff on the piano in E-flat minor, which is all the black notes. And it's actually quite easy to play. It's a dead easy riff to come up with. But he had this thing, bam, bam, bam. And he said, and he had this idea, and I happened to be there. And I said, wow, that's nice. And the opening line was "Company, always on the run, destiny." And I said, "Is the rising sun." He said, "Oh, okay." So we sat there with a joint and a glass of beer, and I think we wrote the thing in 20 minutes. And it's just, I still love it to this day. It's my favorite song, or one of them for sure. It's just got a great mood to it. And, put all my kids through college.
Well, I talked about "Can't Get Enough," and that's you in the beginning with the drum. Is that you calling off the cadence? Yeah. So
we were spread all over the house. We weren't in the studio. We were in a big house. And I was in the basement. Boz was in the boiler room with his bass. Mick and Paul were upstairs in the main living room with their guitars. So I had to get their attention, like 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, cobra, and in we go. And when we listened to playback, we all said, "That's great, man. Let's leave it on." I think it's the most famous counting in rock. But there you go.
No, I know, because I always listen for that when I listen. Now, when you guys broke up in '80, whatever, 80, when you guys did the first breakup, you took your separate ways. What was your path? What did you want to do then? Because once again, that's been such a big part of your life. Now you have money, because as you said, the song Bad Company put your kids through college, so you don't have to worry about that. But what do you do? I mean, well, first of all, did you still have the substance abuse problem at that time? Yeah,
in fact, it got worse because I was really at a loose end. Me and Mick, we noodled around for a year or two, writing songs together. Me and Mick Ralphs. Boz Burrell went off and joined some jazz band. And after about 2 or 3 years, I mean, it's a long time in the desert, Arma Ertegun, who was the head of Atlantic, he called me and said, look, Paul's not coming back. Why didn't you get another singer? You've got a great name. And just, continue as Bad Company. And we did. And we got in Brian Howe, for better or for worse. And it was not a period in my life that I was very happy about. But I just didn't want to see Bad Company roll over and play dead. I wanted to extend it, as did Mick Ralphs. We had this great band, and if Paul didn't want to be in it, well, bollocks, we'll get someone else. It was not the greatest mindset to continue this band, but there was a certain kind of, fuck it, let's just do it. So we got in Brian, and the band went off in a different direction from the classic rock sound that it's most known for. And oddly enough, after Brian had died last year, there were a lot of tributes to him, and a lot of people didn't know of Bad Company pre-Brian Howe. They only knew the Brian Howe version, and Holy Water, and the albums that came with Brian. We did 4 or 5 albums with him, and he was missed. Unfortunately, we didn't get on as people, and there was a contentious feeling for quite a few years, and in the end, he left or he was fired, whichever. It doesn't matter now. But we kept the name alive. We kept the name in the forefront. The music was not the same as the Paul Rodgers era, and it got more and more synthetic, quite honestly. There were a few good songs, but overall, it was not a happy period for me.
Is it hard? Was it hard to adjust to a new frontman when Brian took over? Because you're so used to Paul. You've been mates. You've been in Free. You've been. I mean, what was it like?
I missed him. Yeah, I did miss him, and that's a very good question. Brian was a different animal altogether. He was very much. He became a heavy metal singer, and that really wasn't what we wanted. And he was not, I don't want to speak ill of someone who's passed away, but we just didn't get on. He became really someone that just didn't work with the band. And he would have said, well, Mick and Simon were out in their own little world. Yeah, I was drinking a lot, Mick was drinking a lot, we were all drinking a lot, but we still managed to play very well. And we did some good shows. I'm not knocking it. It just wasn't the Bad Company that I'd grown up with, and I was so happy when Paul came back in the fold,
Now, when did you get sober, and was there a defining moment that made you said, I have to stop this?
Yeah, well, I stopped drinking in 1982 for a few years, and I went on and off the wagon, as it were. I haven't drunk now for about 6 years. I stopped doing coke in 1996, so that's 26 years. So I've been totally sober now for about 6 years, but I stopped doing all the heavy shit over 25 years ago, and best thing I ever did.
Was there a reason, or was it just burning you up? I mean, because...
Oh, yeah, I nearly died.
What happened there?
Well, I was on a tour bus, and I was drinking Jack Daniels and taking Ativan, which is a heavy soporific, and I was left in the bunk on the tour bus, and my girlfriend at the time, all the guys had left and they had gone into the hotel, and I was convulsing on the bunk, and she pulled me off the bunk and slapped me and walked me around and pretty much saved my life. I'm sure my life was saved that night, and that's when I thought, fuck this, I'm going to go into rehab. And I did. And for the most part, you know, I stayed away. I stayed away from coke, that's for sure. I never took coke ever again. But I drank now and again and did pills now and again. But, you know, those days are long over now. Thank God.
Now, in like 94, you had Robert Hart start singing. What is... Once again, it's a new singer, and you have to adjust again. Were you a little hesitant to get him involved because you didn't get along with Brian, or what happened?
Robert was great. He played very much like he sang very much like Paul Rodgers. That same bluesy, soulful voice. He was a lovely guy. He was so nice to work with, and that's a huge part of any success. You know, you can have a little bit of touchstone, a bit of friction now and again, but when it's toxic, it's no good. You've got to like the guy. And I like Robert. I love Mick. I've always loved Mick Ralphs. And I love Boz Burrell. Paul Rodgers I like and I respect. And I think the feeling is mutual. There's a like and there's a respect there. I wouldn't go so far as to say as I love him, like I love Mick and I love Boz, who passed away a few years ago. But Robert Hart was very likable, very amenable, great singer, good-looking guy, great front guy. So there was not really that much for me to do, just to get on and, play drums and with the freedom that I hadn't had with Brian Howe.
Now, how did Paul get back into the fold? What happened?
Well, what happened was that after 25 years of Bad Company, Swan Song released a compilation, a double CD, four CDs. And they asked if we would do a promotional video for it, to launch it. And I think Paul was kind of fed up with the way the band had been going, and he'd been out with, he'd been doing solo stuff. And he called up one day and said, look, I want to come down and have a little jam and let's see how we get on. And he came in and it was like slipping into an old pair of shoes. It was just wonderful. And I forget the actual year, but we did a tour and it was great. And we've never really looked back,
Now, what is it like now? I mean, as I said, since Paul's been back for a while, I mean, do you guys come in, you tour, what is your relationship? I mean, when you get together now, do you have a definitive plan, or do you just play it by ear?
Well, no, we did have a plan until COVID came along. We had a great tour, and we finished it with Leonard Skinner. We did a great nationwide tour with Skinner, finished in Las Vegas of October 2019, and then COVID came along. And we really haven't done anything since, much to my chagrin. I really miss playing with the guys. But, Paul is very cautious about his health and he doesn't want to go out. We're just waiting to see. I mean, a lot of other bands have bitten the bullet and they're going out, and good luck to them. But Paul was a little more cautious, shall we say. I'm waiting, I'm around, I've got all the vaccines and boosters and whatever. So we'll just have to see, but it's a waiting game right now.
Now, you recently played some gigs with G.E. Smith. How did that relationship start? I know you played in Sellersville, which isn't too far from Philly.
Yeah, I love it.
What is that show? Explain what that show is.
Well, it's I've known G.E. Smith on and off for years now. He lives in the next village to me. I live out in Montauk. He lives in Amagansett, which is just down the road. And I've known him. We've jammed together over the years. I love playing with him. He's a wonderful player. And our shows comprise of some Bad Company songs. We do All Right Now. We do a lot of blues songs, a couple of mine. I do an acoustic song called Maria for my wife. I tell a lot of stories because I've got some great stories of my life on the road. And we just have a lot of fun, but it's like a hobby in a way, Steve. It's not like a career thing. As much as I love playing with GE, as soon as I get the call from Paul, I'm like Roadrunner. I'm out of there. But I do like playing with him.
So, Simon, I'm sure you have some great rock and roll stories from the past. Give me a few gems so I can, so the listeners and me can enjoy them.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have quite a few stories. I think my two favourite ones, well, there's three actually. One involves George Harrison, one involves Ringo, and one involves Bonzo from Zeppelin. And the one with Bonzo was very, very funny because when Bad Company were playing in Los Angeles, Zeppelin were playing, I believe, 2 nights at the Forum. Then they had a night off when we were playing, and then they were doing another night in the Forum after us. So Zeppelin were in town while we were there, and we were all staying at the Hyatt House, which was quite a legendary hotel. And Zeppelin and Bad Company kind of took over the first or the top 5 floors. And we'd had a good gig, and I was just about to go into bed. I was having an early night, about 4 a.m, and I was just getting into bed, and I heard this knock on the door, kind of a boom, boom, boom. And, I thought, oh, Jesus, who the fuck is that? And I said, who is it? And he said, it's Bonzo. I said, well, I'm not in. He said, come on, open the door, you bastard. So I thought, there's nothing I can do. I've got to open the door. And there was John in a pretty sober state, I have to say. And we were all a little worried about Bonzo's drinking, but that particular night he seemed to be all right. And he said, come on, we're going out. And I said, John, it's 4 a.m. He said, no. And he waved these car keys at me. He had a set of car keys. He said, come on, I want to show you something. So I went down, we went down to the underground car park, and there, right at the end, in the darkness, was this funny car. They're called funny cars. They go around like a NASCAR, basically, capable of doing, God knows, 200 miles an hour. And he said, come on, let's take it for a spin. I thought, oh, God. So anyway, we get in it, and it's got this little gear stick, which is only about 3 inches wide, or tall, rather. So he starts the thing up, and it's enormous power. And we sort of screech out of the car park. All the car alarms are going off in the other cars. And we hurtle onto Sunset Boulevard. Now, this is 4 a.m. You'd think there wouldn't be much traffic, but it was packed. It's still LA on a Sunday night. So we're doing in first gear. We're doing about 60, and the speed limit is 35 on Sunset. And he's starting to look down. I said, Jesus Christ, John, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm trying to find second gear. So he, gets second gear, and we're doing about 70 this time. And, of course, in the rearview mirror, there's the cop car. We hadn't been on the road a minute. And John pulls over, and, the guy in the loudspeaker says, put your hands where I can see them, la, la, la. And he comes up to John's side, to the driver's window, and he's wearing these mirrored sunglasses. It's 4 in the morning. What the hell is he doing? LA, So he says, wind down the window. John lowers the window, and he says, he said, first of all, he said, driver license and registration. And John said, look, I'll be honest, officer, I haven't got any of that. And the guy lowers his sunglasses. He says, you're John Bonham. I thought, thank God, there is a God. And he was all kind of like a fan, all of us. He said, what is this car? I want to see under the, wow, man, la, la, la. But he said, you were doing 70 miles an hour back there. And John said, look, I'm really sorry, officer. I've only just got it, and I was trying to figure it all out. He said, look, I've got something. And he reaches in the glove box, and the cop goes, hey, careful. He says, all right, it's all right. And he pulls out 3 tickets for Zeppelin at the Forum tomorrow night, the next night. He says, "Here, officer, I'll give you these 3 tickets if you don't give me one of yours." And the cop was like putty in John's hand. He became this fan. He said, "Thank you, man. The guys at the station will never believe it." He said, "I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to stop the traffic. You're going to go back to wherever you came from." John had told him, we're staying at the Hyatt House. "And you're going to go and you're going to go to bed." He's like a father. He said, "All right." And John said, "All right, officer, I'll do that." So, yeah, he stops the traffic. John does this very gentle U-turn, and we trundled back to the Hyatt House at a legitimate 35 miles an hour.
How insane was the Hyatt House? I've heard stories like that was just insane, like rock and roll.
Well, it was only crazy when Zeppelin were there because, quite honestly, most bands stayed there. But in terms of debauchery and hijinks, no one came close to Zeppelin. In particular, Bonzo, who was a one-man wrecking crew. I mean, he had a whole room just set up for a drum kit, and he would play drums all day and all night. I mean, he was just... But it was pretty crazy. I mean, Bad Company had their moments there as well, but it was this sort of beacon of debauchery and whatever you want to call it. But I don't know how many other bands perpetrated, their hijinks. I know Mooney from The Who had his moment. He was swung from one balcony to another outside. So The Who and Zeppelin, and to a minor degree, Bad Company, we all had our moments.
Now tell me your George Harrison story.
Well, the George Harrison is much more sedate, and but to my mind, it's the most jaw-dropping story. We were invited. I was staying with Mick Rouse, the guitarist from Bad Company, who was only a couple of miles from George's palatial estate called Friar Park, an enormous house. And we were at a New Year's Eve party, and everyone was, drinking and smoking and having a great time because it was the most beautiful house, and George was a great host. And around about, I guess 11:30 at night, George tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Come on, I want to show you something." And I was like, wow, okay. I mean, I'd kind of gotten to know him. We were quite friendly. But for him to single me out, I was really quite honoured. So we leave the main ballroom where everyone's bopping, and we walk down this enormous corridor, and there's every Beatles album, platinum, and every award known to man on the walls. And I thought, well, maybe he wants to show me that. But no, we keep on going to the kitchen. There's a huge kitchen. And in the corner, there was this big, it was all flagstones, old-fashioned floor. And set in the corner was this big brass ring, and it was a handle. And George suddenly starts, lifting it up, and this flagstone comes up, to vertical. And I hear this water lapping underneath. And I think, well, fuck me, maybe he thinks I'm a plumber, not a drummer. Maybe he's got some rising damp problem, I don't know. But anyway, George gets his flashlight and he disappears down this ladder out of sight. And he says, come on, you're waiting. So I look down and there's this ladder. And sure enough, there's a little rowboat bobbing. It's tied to the end of the ladder, the bottom of the ladder. And George is sat in it. So I gingerly, come down the stairs, only 6 or 7 steps, and I lower myself into this boat. And George gets the oars, and before he does that, he presses a button somewhere in the wall, and all these lights come on, and we're on a lake under his house. And it must have been, Steve, I would say 100 yards in circumference. It was a man-made lake. And now here's a kicker. All around the circular wall were these aquariums, huge aquariums, all lit up with all sorts of fish floating in it. So we got a little spliff, and he starts rowing, and he looks at me, and my jaw is just velcroed to my chest because I've never, before or after, never seen anything like this. And in the understatement of the century, he looks at me, he says, "Nice, isn't it?" And that now, I'll follow that up with a little later in the evening. It comes to be 12 o'clock, the new year. And as we're singing that, Old Acquaintance, Be Forgot, that song that no one really knows the words to, just as we finished it, we're all in the ballroom. And one of George's aides, his PAs, come up and says, "George, there's someone at the door, someone at the front door." And George was a very trusting guy. He said, "Well, let him in. Let him in." So this guy comes in, and he's dressed in chauffeur livery. He's got, a hat and the buttons all down the front. And he's bearing this presentation case, like a jewellery case, but quite big, maybe 12, 15 inches long, 5 or 6 inches across. And he gives it to George, and, okay. So George opens it, and inside is a solid gold telegram. And he lifts it out, and inscribed on it, it says, "To George Harrison from Sir Joseph Lockwood and everyone at EMI, their record label, to congratulate you on the sale of your 2 billionth record." And George seemed to be the master of understatement of that evening, because he said, "Oh, this will make a nice paperweight," and leaves it on his desk. And we're all like, "What the fuck have we just witnessed? Your 2 billionth record?" So forget Springsteen and Jackson and all the lovely people and the Garth Brookses of this world and Elvis. But when it comes to record sales, no one will ever touch the Beatles. And that was in 1984, by the way.
Wow.
So go figure.
Okay, now Ringo, since we're talking about Beatles, just a bit of a Ringo story.
Well, Ringo's I love him. He's not only is a huge influence on my drumming, but he's just a great guy. And this is probably the least spectacular of the stories, but it kind of shows what the guy is. We were on tour, the all-star band, and it was me, Ringo, Jack Bruce, Peter Frampton, Mark Rivera, and Gary Brooker. We were on this tour bus, and we were coming down from Portland. No, let me get this right. From Seattle to Portland, so down the West Coast. And you have to go through the redwood forests, and this is just magnificent, these huge redwoods. So we're coming through, and everyone's looking out the window going, "Oh, man, what?" Ringo says, "I want to stop the next place, and I want to get out, and we're going to walk through these redwood trees and get a sense of their majesty." So, all right, he's the boss. We could use a break. So we pull into a rest area, and, we all get out and smelling the pines and marveling at these incredible trees. 10, 15 minutes, Ringo's wandered off somewhere. And I went with him, and this is the weirdest thing. Set in the ground was a stake with a number 7 on it. Maybe there was some event the week before, and these are markers. But it really freaked Ringo out, because that's his lucky number. And he says, "Oh, this is amazing." And I didn't want to tell him that maybe there was 6 and 5 and 4 around the corner. But anyway, he thought it was a mystical thing. So he sits down on this stump looking at this number 7. And he's meditating, whatever. And then we get the call from the road manager, "Come on, the tour manager, we got to go. Come on, you guys." And Ringo says, "Leave me for a few moments." "Go on, fuck off, go. We're back in the bus." So we all get back in the bus. And the bus, you can't see from where Ringo's sitting. So there's Ringo Starr sitting on a stump, meditating, like Rodin's sculpture, right? Meditating. Suddenly around the corner, there's this woman, this hiker, and she's got a little backpack and a little stick with a V in it, and she's hiking, and she's on the trail, and there's no way she's going to miss Ringo Starr. And Ringo's sitting there, and she's walking, and she gets to within 6 feet of him, and she suddenly, like, freaks. She's probably a 60-year-old lady. She knows who Ringo Starr is. But there's no one else around, just Ringo on a stump. So he sort of flashes, you know, I don't know what he said to her, but she kind of, you know, jerks and stumbles off, kind of shaking her head, and we're just tittering at her, because we can imagine the scene when she gets home. She says, around the dinner table, I saw Ringo Starr in the woods today. And her hubby's, you know, probably said, yeah, all right, probably an acid flashback from your youth, darling. All right, whatever.
No, I want to ask you real quick. When you said, you know, Led Zeppelin was the kings of debauchery, and you guys did, you know, some things. What were some of the instances of debauchery for Bad Company? Like, what was considered? I mean, did you ever trash a hotel room?
Yes.
No, I got to ask you. I've always wondered. My feeling is why? Like, I mean, because then you don't you worry like where you're going to sleep. I mean, how does a trashing a hotel room start?
We never trashed the room that we slept in, but there was always a party room that was designated amongst the 7 or 8 in our part. You know, in our ensemble, we always designated. We had one room because we're not that silly that we would encroach on other members of the band who want to go to bed early. So yeah. And then, you know, you have a few drinks, a few lines, a few beers. You want to show off to the girls that you got. And suddenly you might break something. Oh, I've broken something. Oh, dear. Then the TV goes out the window. It's just, no, stupid, criminal shit behavior. But because we had a lot of money, and the kicker was that we, in one hotel, you know, when we were checking out, Peter Grant, the manager, you know, there was this sort of junior desk manager at the hotel, and he said, look, there was a room that sustained a lot of damage, and I've got to charge you $1,500 for reparation. And, you know, Peter pulled out this wad of hundreds. He said, here you are, mate, yeah. And the guy said, listen, I've always wondered, what's it like? I've always wanted to do that. So Peter pulls out another 1,000. He says, pick a room. Come on. And sure enough, we all go down to this room that no one's in, and this guy goes nuts and does $1,000 worth of damage. So anyway, in answer to your question, Steve, look, it's something that we did in those days. It was stupid, I know. No one really got hurt. And it was just venting. Maybe we had a bad gig. But at least we didn't drive Cadillacs into swimming pools like
exactly. Well, I want to thank you, Simon. What's coming up for you? What's in the future of Simon Kirke? What are you going to do? Some more shows, solo shows, or like the?
Well, yeah. I hope. Look, I don't really know what's happened with Bad Company. Quite honestly, COVID is still looming. You know, especially with people of my age. Well, me and Paul Rodgers are in our 70s now, and we have to be really, really careful. I would love to do some more Bad Company shows, and I know Paul is going to do a show he's going to test the waters, so to speak, in November. And if he likes, you know, if he performs well, and if he feels up to it, then we'll do some stuff next year. That will be we're coming up on 3 years now that we've been off the road, and it's not good. I do solo shows. I do shows with G.E. Smith, who's a wonderful guitar player. And I'm also getting into movie scoring, which is something I really want to do as my performing years start to die down, you know. I would love to get into movie scoring. I've done a couple of little movies. I'm still writing songs all the time. And I've got a book, you know, obviously like all rock musicians of my age, we've all written books. I don't know if I'll publish it, but it makes great reading. I'll probably release it when I'm dead and gone. I don't know.
What made you decide to write the book? Because I always think when you write a book, it's so revealing. And I know people who've written books, you really get in touch with your inner self. But then they worry if, I know guys have written books that didn't do that well, and they go, oh, Christ, people didn't really find me as entertaining as I thought. What made you decide to write the book?
Right. Well, I tell you what, more than anything, I wanted some kind of order in my life, and I wanted to go back because I have a very interesting. Luckily, and I thank God, I'm clean and sober now, and I've been through many morphs, many different changes in my life. But I just wanted to document how I started, for nothing else than for my own gratification. I was given an offer by an English publishing house, and it was peanuts. I mean, it's not like I would do it for the money. And quite honestly, they wanted sex and drugs and the whole thing. And they want things that sell, which is, fair enough. They're in the commercial business. They don't want this philosophical, oh man, life was one big yoga pose. No, they want, and I didn't want to upset my kids. I didn't want to upset my wives. So, nah. But it was great to write it all down, and I sent it to a couple of friends to read, and they were like, whoa, this is great, man. You should. So it was just a cathartic exercise,
Well, that's awesome. I want to thank you for coming on. How can people catch up with you and see what you're doing? You have your website.
I have a website, but I'm terrible. I'm a lapsed. I don't keep up with social media, Instagram, and all that stuff. They can get in touch with me through David Spiro, who's my manager, and they can just go Google him. Anyone who wants to get in touch with me, he's the guy. And if you want to book me, you can do that through David as well. I do solo shows. I do shows with this wonderful band called Empty Pockets, a great little band. And, I just love playing, and I want to keep playing in some capacity or other.
So people, go check out Simon, Google him, go listen to some Bad Company today. This weekend, go listen to Bad Company, chill out. It's always good to listen to. If you're my age, it's going to take you back to a time when you're listening to, from the Philly area, MMR or YSP. And go to my website, coopertalk.net. You can find over 900 episodes. Email me, Cooper at coopertalk.net. Twitter, I'm at CooperTalk. Instagram, I'm at CooperTalk1. Remember, I'm Steve Cooper. I'm only as hip as my guests. And don't forget, drink your water, take your vitamins, eat your vegetables, and I'll talk to you guys next time.